Feel empty? Like something is missing? Fantasia helps the disenchanted become enchanted by inspiring them to become conscious, holistic creators who dance with life. Each week we explore new ideas that expand consciousness, increase love, and enhance magical awareness. Now, here's your host, Laura Giles.
It's a new year, and we want to start off with a bang. And for most of us, that means a life makeover. We want a delicious, magical life that inspires us, right? I mean, who doesn't want that? We all have a different vision of what that looks like, but there's one thing that every enchanting vision has in common, and that's flow. Have you ever noticed that there are three types of people? Those who are happy, creative, and in the flow, and those who have been there but have lost it somewhere, and those who have heard of this thing called flow, but they haven't experienced it and have no idea how to get there. It doesn't matter what they achieve, what they acquire, or how much they learn, nothing ever feels great. It might be better, it might be wonderful for a while, but it's not sustained. Yeah? Think about it. This amazing energy is so desirable that we have built our whole society around it. We go to college to learn things that we can market and turn into a career that will give us that juicy feeling from our work. We sculpt our bodies in the gym with healthy food, cosmetics, flattering clothes, and with plastic surgery to give us the physical looks that will give us this indescribable vibe from our looks. We chase spiritual experiences, go on retreats, and take psychedelics to be in this space. And when we're sick, we spend lots of money on medicines, therapies, and devices to keep that vitality from slipping away so we can keep on chasing the dream. For those who have lost it and those who have never had it, no amount of chasing ever seems to get us any closer. We might go on a dream vacation to a beautiful place with warm sun, sparkling beaches, moonlight horseback riding, snorkeling with the manatees, and tempting foreign foods that make us feel really high. But the moment we get back home, it's like the bubble bursts and that feeling is gone. Or we might meet someone who's absolutely delightful and makes us feel like we're the most important person in the world. But 3 months in, it's just another day with just another person. Have you ever given any thought to what that feeling is, or where it comes from, or what happens to it? Ever wonder why some seem to have it effortlessly while others can't even glimpse it? I have a theory that nobody's paying attention to, and that's shame. I know that's not the most obvious answer, but hear me out. Shame is more than just a feeling of embarrassment or fear of ostracism. It's the silent and often invisible force that robs us of our passion, drive, ambition, and natural ability to live in a state of flow. And flow is where we live when we're aligned with our purpose, living with creativity and connected to all life. It's who we are naturally. So we don't actually have to do anything to be there except get out of our own way, unless we're carrying shame. In today's podcast, I'm going to be talking about what shame is, why it's so powerful, how it blocks flow, and give you some tips on how to recognize it because it hides, and what to do about it. Our mission at Fantasia is to help people move from disenchanted to enchanted because we all benefit when we're surrounded by spunky, innovative people. I mean, I love being surrounded by high energy, enthusiastic, open people because it brings out those same feelings in me. It makes me more creative, enthusiastic, and dynamic too. It's like we feed off each other and give each other power, so it's sexy. So I want you to join me here in doing whatever you do. And fortunately, I host a free group where you can be with other people who want the same thing. So if I'm preaching to the soloist who wants to be part of the choir, come join us. The link's in the show notes. All right. So I want to talk about guilt before I talk about shame because they're closely related. Both are emotional responses to something that happened or something that we fear might happen. Like all emotions, both have a positive purpose. Guilt occurs when we're not in alignment with our values. It's there to say, hey, buddy, you're violating your beliefs. You've done something bad and it's time to fix it. So think of it like the warning light on your car. If you pay attention early, you can typically fix the situation before it gets too difficult, time-consuming, and costly. And once you fix it, your self-worth goes back up, things go back in balance, and life is good again. So guilt is a great asset when you use it as it's intended to be used. But guilt has a downside. It can be used to manipulate. There are religions that are known for using guilt to control others. Most of us have heard of Catholic guilt or Jewish guilt. Then there's also white guilt. So whether you have done something wrong or not, the threat of ostracism and judgment is there to keep you in line. It's used to punish you. And when someone else is imposing guilt upon you, that's not guilt. That's shame. That's very damaging. And in fact, this is where religious trauma syndrome comes from. It's basically PTSD that comes from the strict religious controls that a person is brought up in that doesn't allow them to have personal freedom. So guilt says, I did something bad. Shame says, I am bad. And the positive purpose of shame is to keep us connected. We don't want to be so offensive that we lose our human connection because we depend on each other for survival. Acceptance is literally a life and death issue because humans cannot survive alone. Love, connection, and acceptance are as vital to a healthy life as food, water, clean air, and shelter. Now, there's two types of shame. Let's say that I grew up in a healthy, warm family with great boundaries and high touch. I turn 21, go out and get a drink for the first time and act a fool. The next day, I feel ridiculous and I don't want to show my face around people. I'm highly embarrassed. And this is normal, healthy shame. We all have this from time to time because nobody's perfect. Most of the time, the shame is overblown. Nobody really cares about what we did. But sometimes it's pretty bad and we have to learn new skills or strategies and make new choices so we're more in alignment with society's values. If this sounds like I'm saying that we have to conform, that's exactly right. In order to live in harmony with other people, we can't just run amok and do whatever we want to do. We have to give up some freedom and autonomy so that everyone feels safe. I don't get to take without giving, rape people, or kill people. Hopefully, I don't have those urges, but if I do, I have to learn to balance my needs with the needs of society, my partner, or my family so that I can be part of the tribe. To keep in mind that if I conform too much and become the child that my parents wished they had instead of the person that I was born to be, then I've completely lost myself. That wouldn't be fantastic. So it's always about the balance of me and we. So that's healthy shame. And then there's what I call pathological shame. The pathological shame starts young. It comes from growing up in a family where you didn't get your physical or emotional needs met. What I'm about to say comes from the work of Dr. Lawrence Heller. So if you want to know more about it, please feel free to look him up. Dr. Heller says that shame is the root of complex PTSD. And this is different from post-traumatic stress disorder because post-traumatic stress disorder is the result of a single emotionally overwhelming event, like I'm hit by a car, I witnessed a terrorist attack, or I'm mugged or beaten. And complex PTSD happens when a person experiences long-term exposure to traumatic events over months or years. When someone grows up in a household where they don't get their physical or emotional needs met, it impacts the way they see themselves, their ability to connect with others, nature, and themselves, and the way they move in the world. What no one tells you is that even if they become very successful and seem really put together on the outside, on the inside, their self-talk is horrible. No one's more critical of themselves than they are. They may hit themselves, cut themselves, do destructive things, or sabotage relationships and job opportunities because they really don't like themselves. We all know the obvious signs of shame, like walking around with your head down, people-pleasing, having raised shoulders, always being on guard, worrying, being depressed, isolating, stuttering, not speaking up or being indecisive, codependency, over-apologizing, coldness, can't take a compliment, being angry, ruminating about past mistakes or missed opportunities, imposter syndrome, being defensive, or allowing themselves to be treated like a doormat. However, no one talks about the other signs of shame because they're either more socially acceptable or they're just a very good mask for shame. And these are perfectionism, being super independent and capable, procrastination, alcoholism, eating disorders, sex addiction, or any type of addictive behavior, feeling different from others, taking on other people's personalities, insomnia, digestive issues, and headaches. Now, all this starts really, really young. So if you can, put yourself in the mind of yourself in utero. You're not separate from your mom. Her thoughts are your thoughts. Her feelings are your feelings. Her sensations are your sensations. Any worries she has are also yours. If she's scared about the pregnancy because of finances, illness, or relationship issues, you hear all that. The same is true when you're 6 months old. It takes a while for a baby to differentiate itself from its mother and the surrounding environment. Babies are little narcissists. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way. I mean that they're all selfish and think the world revolves around them and that everything that happens is because of them. So if you're 6 months old, your mom's got postpartum depression, she feeds you and changes you when you cry, but she's not cuddling you or paying any attention to you. So your emotional needs are neglected. You're not getting beaten or sexually assaulted, but this still can impact your capacity to connect to your body, emotions, and other people. These people are seen by others as cold, aloof, distant, and maybe analytical. If you ask them how they feel, they don't know. I work with somatic therapy, which means we use the body to help us know what's truly going on because the body doesn't lie. The mind definitely plays tricks on this, so I don't trust that as much at all. But when I ask them what sensations they feel in their bodies, they don't know. They don't notice any. So being in their bodies and feeling their feelings was dangerous. So they learned to dissociate from them. It wasn't safe to feel or connect because that led to getting hurt. So they're very disconnected. In fact, if they come for help and start to be back in their bodies, this can feel very threatening. So they stop healing right there. It just feels too dangerous. They want to think their way through, and that really just doesn't work. As little people, our brains aren't well developed yet. We don't have the ability to think abstractly. We're in survival mode. We can't walk, talk, move, feed ourselves, clean ourselves, or do anything, and are completely dependent upon our caretakers for everything. So when they don't give us what we need, we think it's my fault. It's because I'm not good enough. We really have two choices. It's either because our parents are bad or because we're bad. Our parents can't be bad because we need them. We can't survive without them. So it's dangerous to turn our backs on them. If we're bad, that's kind of okay because now we're in the driver's seat at least. We can do something about that situation to make it better. If I just figure out what I need to be good, I can turn this around. Got it? So this is adaptive. It makes sense on the level of a child who doesn't have the ability to reason. And there is your shame. If abuse or neglect happens a little later, so between 6 months and 2 years, it can result in people pleasing or looking outside of myself for safety and approval. But it's also the inability to really receive it. And this is about the capacity to tune into our own needs and emotions and receiving nourishment. In other words, I'm going to take care of you so that you feel safe, then I can feel safe. You're probably still not going to give me what I need, but at least I won't feel threatened. And this is another face of shame. Another way this shows up early in life is the inability to trust. So early neglect and abuse leaves the child feeling betrayed, so they don't trust. These kids tend to be the perfectionists and overachievers because I can do it myself. And if I can do it myself, I don't need you and I won't be let down. So that's good. We want our kids to be self-sufficient. So these kids can grow up to be adults who need help but don't ask for it. Or if they do ask for it, they don't really know what's wrong, so they don't know who to go to and don't know how to articulate the problem. It just kind of, things aren't really good. And let me tell you the terrible truth. Professionals often don't know either because everything looks good on the outside. We think of the underserved and people who slip through the cracks as being poor and seriously mentally ill. There's a lot of wounded well out there who aren't getting the help because they're too capable and are over-controlled. And that's another facet of shame too. If the onset of neglect or abuse happens between 2 and 4, or if it's still going on, it results in issues of independence. And this is an age where kids are mobile. They're talking. They want to explore and do stuff. If the environment isn't too controlled, or if it is too controlled, they don't get to have opinions, touch things, explore, and make choices. Or if they are ridiculed for their choices, they don't develop healthy boundaries. They become afraid to speak up without guilt or fear, and they don't try new things, and they become super dependent. When you see the adult children who are in their 20s, 30s, and even 40s who are living in their parents' basement because they lack the independence to live on their own, this is why. In that case, the parents did too much. They gave too much. And I don't think of this as neglect or abuse because it typically comes from a place of care. But the impact is that the child doesn't have the confidence to do things for himself. So they're afraid to try. They can't think for themselves because they never had to. And if they are put in a position where they have to, it's just overwhelming. This is another hidden issue that people don't ask for help with because often the children know that it's motivated by love. They feel the love, so they don't think their parents did anything wrong. We're supposed to love, right? They also benefited from this love because they often got so much in material goods. So, what's there to complain about? Anyway, another way that this hides is that sometimes the way that independence is blocked is not obvious. It's very common for parents to see themselves as supportive and loving. And when you get into how that's shown, you start to realize that they're controlling their kids through finances. For example, I'll pay my child's insurance as long as she does what I want her to do. If I give my adult son gas money when he visits, that's sending the message that I still see him as a child. And that reinforces that he's still dependent. I might criticize my child's choices and wrap it in a loving sandwich so it lands more softly.
Love the vibe? Join the tribe. It's free, and the link is in the show notes. See you there.
But this is another common way that we infantilize and shame our children as well. An example might be something like, "You're not going to wear that, are you?" Or it could be, "Oh, it's wonderful that you're applying for jobs in banking. I'm so happy that you're finally taking your career seriously." Or it could be something like, "Let me treat you to the spa. You look tired." So whatever they say, it leaves a child feeling like they're stupid, wrong, bad, and are still children. It typically doesn't occur to them that their parents are unskilled or abusive because they do see that the parents care. When the child is young, parents don't know any better. Trauma is passed down to our kids through our DNA in the form of epigenetics and from our socialization. So I just finished watching the series The Crown, and that's a perfect example of intergenerational trauma. King George VI grew up in a time when the aristocracy had arranged marriages. They married for wealth and power, and couples often didn't know or even like each other. And they didn't rear their own kids. And the kids were presented to them daily to look at, basically, because they didn't really interact with them or have relationships with them. So King George VI was neglected by his parents, and his nanny abused him. His father had a terrible temper and would go off for the slightest thing. So George grew up in terror and developed a stammer. Not a lot is known about his personality, but you can guess that all that didn't make him the best parent. And he was the father of Queen Elizabeth II. She was very duty-bound. She couldn't express her feelings or be seen to be human because she was God's anointed queen and was above all that. So she was cold. Her husband was critical and negative. So how do you think the kids turned out? Well, her son, the present King Charles, was a weird and awkward boy. He was shy, didn't have any friends. He wasn't athletic or likable like his brother. And if it weren't for him being the heir to the throne, he wouldn't have had a lot going for him. And he had an arranged marriage with Princess Diana, who was thankfully warm and involved with her kids, but she was also emotionally erratic and died young. So her kids are warmer than the previous generations, probably because they had an active, attentive mother, but they still had issues because of the control, not being able to express themselves and how they grew up. So I'm not trying to pick on the royals, I just make an easy target to use as an example because they're so well known. Our parents can only do what they know. Nobody is intentionally horrible. So if you weren't a perfect parent, you can forgive yourself and do better. If this was your parents, it's not their fault. They did what they were taught. And now it's up to you to heal yourself and clean things up so that your children get a more positive examples than negative ones. Because let's face it, everyone jacks up their kids. I'm not saying this to be mean. I did it too. And we do it because we're not perfect. Even when we think we're doing things right, doing the best things, they can turn out wrong. So raise your hand if you read every parenting magazine and book and did everything the experts said and it still turned out wrong. Yeah, that was me. And I have to live with those choices. So I'm letting that go and doing better. And I would suggest you do the same. The last way that early neglect and abuse shows up is in love and sexuality. When we're well nourished, our hearts are open, and we can engage in loving relationships and have healthy sexual expressions. And I think we can all look around and see that as a society, we're in bad shape with this one. We have lots of people who declare themselves as asexual, lots of predators who are customers for all this sex trafficking that's going on. And pedophilia, porn, sex addiction, and paraphilia, so that means intense sexual arousal to atypical object situations or people, like being aroused by high-heeled shoes, traffic stops, or blind people. All that seems to be at an all-time high. If you're impacted by any of these things, how easy do you think it's going to be in a place of flow? Shame is pervasive. The idea that I'm not worthy and nobody can love me interferes with everything. If some Adonis shows interest in me, I might self-sabotage because my 3-year-old self says, if you knew the real me, you wouldn't like me. If I'm offered a dream job, I might accept it and rule like a tyrant so everyone hates me because my inner child is saying I have to do everything or else these people are going to mess things up. So even though I have what I want, I could be living in a state of flow. I'm not, because I'm not happy at all. It's not the job or my coworkers, it's me. It's all because of shame. Another thing we don't talk about when it comes to relationships is that our parents' relationship with each other and us sets us up for our own relationships. This also perpetuates intergenerational trauma. So let's say that I have a cold mother, so she's neglectful, and an absent father. What do you think I'm going to look for in a partner? You got it. Someone who's like one of them, because my inner child says my parents must love me. They take care of me, so coldness and abandonment are what love look like to me. So here comes Mr. Neglect or Mr. Never Here, and my heart goes pitter-patter. This is what I have been looking for. This feels familiar. This must be love. And I choose the guy who's going to give me the repeat pattern of my childhood if I'm not mindful. Even if I am mindful, I may still be tempted to go for the wrong guy because a healthy guy isn't going to feel exciting. He's going to have boundaries and not love bomb me, not abuse me or play games with me, and I may not know how to deal with that. Or he may be flirting with me and I totally miss it because I don't know what healthy flirting looks like. I may want someone to stalk me or love bomb me, and I might need someone to rescue because I'm that people pleaser. And none of these situations will result in flow. They're not easy, healthy, creative, or nurturing. They're just the same old, same old. And once this pattern of shame is in place, it's very hard to break out of it. It's like it's self-sustaining. So let's say that I am in a house with critical parents. And this is a very common scenario, okay? So we're at dinner, and the only thing I can control is how much I eat or what I eat. So I become a picky eater. I'll eat anything. But my parents forced me to eat, so now I really don't want to eat anything. And I develop digestive issues because meals are so stressful that I can't digest. When we're in fight or flight, digestion just isn't working. So maybe I get stomach aches, diarrhea, constipation, and I'm super skinny. I don't have a body image issue. It's just completely a control issue because my parents won't let me have my own ideas or freedom. They won't let me eat what I want to eat, basically. So dad makes fun of me for not eating and being skinny, and this increases my shame. So I do my best to be invisible so he won't see me and he'll leave me alone. Now I have a loneliness problem because isolating isn't just from him, it's from distrusting everybody. People find me weird. I don't learn healthy social cues, so people don't know if I'm kidding, nervous, stalking, or what. And this makes me feel even worse, so I isolate even more. I become a perfectionist who doesn't need anyone because I don't want to have to ask anyone for anything. I become a high-powered executive with lots of money so I can feel good about something, and yet I don't feel happy at all. I don't really feel anything except numb, but if I did feel, I'd probably notice I'm depressed, anxious, powerless, a lot of pain, a lot of shame. If I could hear myself, I would hear my tiny self criticizing myself, saying words of self-hate, and urging me to do things that harm and deprive myself because it's the only way I know how to control my badness and make me acceptable. Because remember, that hurt part is very young. I know it's easy to do with other people and not so easy with yourself, but have compassion for that little person inside of you. They're just trying to survive. Lots of people judge trauma by how bad it was. It's like if you endured something disfiguring, you're more worthy of compassion and have a right to both heal and to have feelings of being hurt than somebody who wasn't physically harmed. But it doesn't matter if you're coming out of being a latchkey kid whose parents provided for you but weren't there, or if your parents were pimping you out and putting cigarettes out on you. It's not about the degree of humiliation and disrespect. Everyone can heal. It's not easy because shame hides, but everyone can heal. And there's lots of ways to do that. As a trauma therapist, I'd recommend that route. And here are some things you can do for yourself. So the first thing that you have to do is get out of the toxic situation. Think about it. If you're standing in a mud puddle trying to shower, are you ever going to get clean? No. It's like healing a wound. You keep tearing away the scab, it's never going to heal. And when you're in a toxic situation, you're in a landmine field, never knowing when the next blow will come and how devastating it's going to be. So that has to be the first priority. Now, if you can't get out of the toxic situation, switch out your dysfunctional coping mechanisms for healthier ones. You want to do that anyway, but if you can cope better, perhaps it'll lessen the damage of the shame. So what healthier coping strategies do I recommend? Well, I checked out dialectical behavioral therapy or radically open dialectical behavioral therapy. So DBT is for people whose emotions you can see, and RODBT is for people whose emotions you can't see. You don't have to have any emotional issues at all to benefit from DBT or RODBT. They're both great skills for everyone to learn to be more emotionally intelligent and more functional. Neither is going to heal your shame, but they will give you skills to make it easier to let go of the shame and to see it for what it is. Next, learn to talk about what happened without judgment. This gets rid of 3 things that hold shame in place. So silence, secrecy, and judgment. Your parents may not understand that they contributed to the shame that is blocking you from being all that you can be. They may think you had a superb childhood full of love, and it's okay. Talking about your truth isn't about getting people to see it your way. It's about combating the silence that keeps the pain in place. And once you learn to be vulnerable with trustworthy people, and notice that I added the caveat with trustworthy people, because healthy vulnerability isn't the same as trauma dumping, you start to feel seen and heard. The vision that is reflected back to you is one of strength and dignity, not badness. So you see a different version of yourself than the one that your toddler self holds. And this is extremely important because in all trauma, the traumatized part is the one who's reacting to the trigger. When a person has shame, that part is very young and has the thinking, feeling, and behavior of a little person. So when you see someone trashing a restaurant because they got salt on their fries when they asked for unsalted fries, it's a young, traumatized part that's acting out. When this little person sees your love and respect reflected back when they talk about their story, it can create cracks in their armor and make them question, maybe I wasn't bad. It can help them to say, maybe it's okay to feel and ask for what I want. Embodying humility also helps to release shame. So humility is about accepting your humanity. We're all frail at times. We all fail. We make mistakes. When you're humble, you don't take your success or failure too seriously. If you fall, you don't have far to go because your feet were always on the ground. If you succeed, you aren't above everyone else and lose contact with your morals or your foundation because your feet are still on the ground. In my experience, being humble also makes you wise. So I began going to moon circles at least a decade ago, and it's part of the culture there to be vulnerable and share your truth. And most of the time, we're not talking about deep things, we're just talking. But the act of being in an environment that was safe to be exposed, share your fears, share your hurts, and let your true self be seen was really freeing. There were times when I shared and thought, oof, I shouldn't have said that. I should have, just kept it to myself. But I couldn't take it back. And I was afraid I might look small in someone's eyes, be judged, or be seen as less than. What I got instead was self-compassion. I didn't die because of what I shared. I wasn't bigger or smaller than I was before. I just was still me, and that was enough. As a result of that practice, it became a lot easier for me to not judge others, have compassion for myself, and just relax. Being bigger than other people or a higher achiever used to be important to me. It's not now. I don't have to prove anything. And that may also happen to you once your shame is not in the driver's seat. To release shame, I would also learn and practice mindfulness. Shame is not easy to treat because it's hidden. And mindfulness helps to bring it out of hiding so we can see it for what it is. We can honestly say, I'm withdrawing because I'm afraid of rejection. And that brings that thought and feeling into the present time. And my adult self can deal with this a lot more rationally than my unconscious child self. I'm much more likely to handle this skillfully when I'm mindful rather than allowing my shame to stay unconscious. You see, trauma doesn't belong to one person. It's holistic. It shows up in the traumatized person's mind through their thinking, their body through the way that they move in the world, their emotions and how they express. And usually this is by being extra, over-controlled, or invisible. Trauma is also social. I already talked about how our parents' trauma gets passed down to us. If my mom learned that love is coldness, she's probably going to be cold too. Or she may go the complete opposite way and be overtly affectionate and giving with no boundaries. Either way, it's a reflection of the same trauma and isn't healthy. So what else could I expect from her? We can't give what we don't have. And that's all she's got. So that's quite likely how I will show up as well. And I'll give it to my kids unless I heal. But the social part of trauma goes beyond our families. It's in our society as well. Criminal behavior comes from trauma. Deviant behavior comes from trauma. Neglect, isolation, loneliness, and horrible bosses comes from trauma. Narcissism is hugely on the social media radar, and it's talked about all the time in therapy environments. That's trauma. That's the pre-birth to 6-month-old who is emotionally overwhelmed and is trying to cope with feeling unsafe. So this is our teachers, pastors, neighbors, lovers, politicians, bus drivers, fast food technicians, everybody. Shame is society-wide. And we can't function as a society of people who are carrying shame. It's too dangerous and not functional. So it's all our responsibility to clean this up. So can you see how compassion helps? Compassion for yourself and for others is the antidote to shame. It's the fuel that powers the flow. When we feel capable of doing things, permitted to show up, and good about what we produce, think, and are, we feel safe to love. Love exists in that space of flow. It's all connected, guys. So the key to being in flow is to be your natural self. It's the natural state of things to change. What stops that energy from moving is fear and shame. When we stop breathing, hold on, pretend, and stop being in the moment, the flow stops. When we let go and live in our integrity, all those wonderful desires, loving feelings, connections, and innovative plans come to us easily. And that's the nature of life. And you can't heal shame all alone. We need someone to witness and validate our pain, struggles, joy, success. We need to witness and validate for others without judgment. Life is social. It's time to stop living it as if we can do it all and do it all alone. So if you feel me and you're ready to risk trying something different, feel free to join my free group. We do that every day, and we can teach you how it's done. The only caveat is that there's a no lurkers policy. Everyone contributes to the safety in the conversation, so it's not easy to be vulnerable with strangers, so we don't have any. Easy enough? If so, see you there. And today's podcast came from a listener's comment. If there's something that you want us to talk about or that you would like to see talked about that helps you move from disenchantment to enchantment, let me know. podcast is for you, and your feedback is very welcome. So thank you for being here and listening. See you next week. Ciao.
Make sure to subscribe to the show on iTunes or Spotify so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, why not show your love with a review? Thanks. See you next week.